What's going on? We're here on the Scotty P Breakdown podcast, and I'm here with Sean Applegate and Ryan Aitken
What's up,
from
Scotty P?
10th Planet, Atlanta.
Yeah, man.
And we've been trying to set this up for a minute, and I'm finally glad I got you guys. We've seen each other multiple times at all the opens, and man, you've been doing really well at the opens. I'm pretty sure you came in second once, and then you also won one.
Yeah, so I've won twice. I won the Arizona and the Chicago. And prior to that, so I won twice. I won the Arizona and the Chicago. Prior to that, I lost to Mateus Lutez in the finals of the Colorado ADCC Open. Yeah, those are the ones I won, and yeah, lost one in the finals.
I watched the match with Mateus Lutez. That was a brutal one. That was a fight.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, you know, I've always known I need to work on my wrestling. He showed me I need to work on like my sprawling, my single leg counters and defense and stuff like that. That's definitely where I'm going to struggle with ADCC until I get it down, which I think wrestling with the Penn State wrestler is really going to help me with that. So
yeah, well, dude, you're just coming off a big win. We just wrapped up at Main Character Jiu-Jitsu last night, and you just won the whole tournament. And it was a spectacle. I definitely called you to go against Taza in the semis. It's hard to call, right? Because you're definitely going to be bigger. You're bigger than I imagined you were going to be. But at 185, Taza was undersized. You came in probably the biggest competitor, and from what I could see, it just looked like you were overwhelming them with the power and the aggressiveness. But yeah, what do you have to say about it?
yeah, well, I knew like Taza excels in overtime too. I know like big thing with Taza are going to be the leg locks in the overtime, right? I noticed that he couldn't finish my teammate Kevin in a leg lock back in the Colorado Open. And Kevin was in there deep twice and was able to get out. So I knew, like, you know, I could handle that. But what's interesting about Taza and the way that he grips your leg is he kind of like gets a nice deep bite, but the entanglement itself doesn't feel like as tight. So I feel like I can shift my knee and move around. And so like when I felt that and he got in like really deep for a second, like right off the rip, you know, and then I was able to thwart that even when we were dry and he had spats on. I figured I felt pretty safe in the leg entanglements moving forward, but definitely wasn't the place I wanted to fight him on for sure. I knew overtime was going to be where I was going to beat him, though he was tripping me up with like playing a lot of arm bar throughout the tournament, and watching the way he would move into that triangle from there.
Yeah, the back, he hit the reverse triangle.
That was very dynamic. Yeah, I haven't really seen Taza do that before, and it was interesting. It was like a total curveball. Haven't seen that.
Yeah, the back take can be kind of rough on the bigger guys because you guys can really put a lot of pressure on the leg and kind of pin it to the mat. So yeah. I've done that before as well, where I was going against a bigger guy in an EBI overtime. I was like, man, maybe I should go for the arm because this dude, if he starts spinning, I'm not really going to be able to hold on to him. So I thought that's kind of where I was seeing Taza go with it as well. Now, I'm gonna just say what I was seeing in the match, and obviously both of you are way better than me. So you know, hopefully Taza doesn't want to kill me, but from what I was seeing, he was throwing that topside leg over to clear the grip. So you had the figure 4 grip and he's in spider web, and he was throwing the leg that was controlling your head over the arm to clear the grip. I do that too a lot. And one of the most annoying things I hate about doing that is that if they re-grip as soon as you do it, your leg is now underneath their armpit, and it's really hard to then come up with more offense. But if you can take the right leg underneath the armpit and then clear the grip, and you re-grip, now I'm at least able to re-attack arm bars or triangles off of it. And Gary Tonen's student did that to Jasmine Rocha in the fight, where she did the same way to clear, but then she did the other leg. So then when Jasmine tried to wrestle up off the armbar, she immediately put her in a triangle armbar situation.
Oh.
And so, I mean, it was cool that with the leg one, he opened up for that reverse triangle. So he like sat out and then removed it and then went behind your back. But you're so strong and fast. I was like, man, I don't know how many times he's gonna be able to do that to you.
Yeah, I mean, like I respect the breaking mechanics of the armbar and stuff. It's just like, to me, you know, when there's a lot of money on the line, if it's the semifinals or the finals, you know, I'm probably gonna take a break. I'm okay with it. I've never had like a catastrophic break happen. So I don't know if that happens. Maybe I'll change my mind, but yeah, no, I don't feel like the arm bar is a super heavy threat. But moving into the chokes is definitely tripping me up. So I got to watch out for that one for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, dude, congratulations on the wins, dude. You got who'd you have in the finals? You had
That was PJ, yeah.
PJ, yeah, that was
Who, like, PJ would do this thing in the overtime where the way I would rotate, like, you know, put my back on the mat and stuff, and then he'd trap me in an arm, almost like an arm triangle position. I'd have to keep rotating, and it would feel every single time we'd end up in the same position where it feels like he's just going to throw a triangle on me. And I think he wanted to, but maybe he didn't want to risk it. I don't know. But every time I was like, fuck, dude, like I could really get caught here. So, you know, I had to be really careful with that.
Yeah, I thought he was gonna step over and try to triangle you too, but I think
Yep.
I think you were moving a little fast and he was exhausted.
Nah, I was trying everything. See, that's the thing is, like I said, you know, like when it comes down to like big money like that, you know, I'm down to take a break, but I know that the choke is gonna, you know, the choke is what's gonna stop me. So, I gotta be really careful with that. And that's definitely the fear in the back of my head when I'm trying to escape. And I'm like, no, just take the arm, please.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime someone's leveling up their passing on me, like they're starting to get in their momentum and they're starting to get to my back, I give them the arm. I'll give you the arm all day, just get off my back. And then and me personally, it's way easier to escape the armbar than it is someone being glued to your back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, smart move. As I was watching Taza play out his strategy, I think he was trying to wear your arm down, right? I mean, at some point when you keep going to the arm, I was like, maybe he's gonna fatigue the arm.
Well,
and
he
then
was
get the break.
definitely like breaking my figure four really well.
Right.
I haven't had someone just tear my figure four apart like that so well. So he was doing something like really well right there. And I don't expect anything less from Taza. You know, he's one of the most technical guys out there. And dude, I don't know if you could see it, but the pace that he was keeping like on the feet and stuff is really reflective of his ADCC training. I can tell, like, you know, I'm out there like getting all slow, feeling like, you know, maybe we can lull into something, you know, and he is just in my face, you know, trying to set off combos, winning the hand fighting and shit. So
he was like, collar tie, feint.
Dude, and he doesn't stop, man. He just keeps moving, which is like night and day compared to the Taza that I remember like watching like 5 years ago. So it's pretty interesting.
Hell yeah. Man, it was awesome to watch. And I appreciate you jumping on here with me.
Yeah.
And so you train at 10th Planet Atlanta, obviously your coach, Sean Applegate, and you guys, like we were kind of mentioning, is just like, you guys are like on that come up. You're like right underneath to where you guys are about to be like the next, you know, mega school for no-gi grappling. And I kind of just want to talk to you guys about like, essentially, how are you guys getting there? Cause you know, the American style of jiu-jitsu right now is like, I show you a technique, you guys copy it. We do that 3 times and then we roll for 15, 20 minutes. And then the better schools are the ones that roll for longer. But obviously you guys are doing something different. And I would just like to know what that is.
I just listen to him.
Yeah.
Let's do what he says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is that you guys got going on, Sean?
So I think like the big difference probably is in the hyper focus on like just like technical refinement all the time. You know, like that's a thing like in jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is a very sensationalist sport because we don't really have a very big separation between like hobby players, competitors, you know, like people in jiu-jitsu are still treating like belts like they apply to skill in the sport. You know what I mean? Like they'll look at 2 competitive athletes and they'll say like, this 21-year-old blue belt is about to fight this 35-year-old black belt. And then when the blue belt submits the black belt, they're like, oh my God, he submitted a black belt. And you're like, if this was any other sport, no one would have questioned this. You know what I mean? Like if you saw a 21-year-old like college athlete and like his coach line up on like a 40-yard dash at like a college, I wonder who's gonna win. You know what I mean? And it's like if the coach won, it would be impressive, you know, because it's like, again, like that's how other sports view this, you know what I mean? But in jiu-jitsu, we're just like, nah, man, like that black belt, like, you know, like this illusion where like when you're 55, you're still going to be as dangerous as you were when you were 25 just because you're a black belt, you know what I mean? Right. And it's like, that's not the thing. So in jiu-jitsu, we don't have a great separation between like people who are doing it for fun, people who are doing it for self-defense, and then people who are serious competitive athletes, you know? Yeah. And I think that's because being a serious competitive athlete in jiu-jitsu is a new thing.
Right.
Like you could have been a serious competitive athlete in jiu-jitsu, but your means weren't really ever going to be there, right? Like, so imagine like 10 years ago when the biggest competitive athletes were like the IBJJF guys. It's like they're competing for free. You know what I mean? It's like you're not getting any money. Like you're relying on all this external stuff for your money. But nowadays, like last night, you have these guys here competing for like 8 grand, 10 grand, you know, like, I guess talking about $1 million tournament. You know what I mean? There's another tournament I just heard about that's like $100,000 tournament coming up. Like real money, you know?
Real money.
And so now we can start to make that separation. And what you're going to see, I think, when we make that separation is you're going to start to see the competitive athletes in jiu-jitsu move away from the sensationalist attitude. And so like in jiu-jitsu, we have a very sensationalist attitude. So you'll see these moves that are like fancy, weird, kind of crazy moves. And some like relatively good competitor will hit them on like a far less skilled competitor. And then the entire jiu-jitsu world will be like, hey, have you seen this new move? You know what I mean? And it's a move that's never going to win you anything.
Right.
And when you're a new competitive athlete and you're looking up to these guys and you're like, what are they doing? And you buy into the idea that that's what they're actually doing against the best guys in the world. And you start training that stuff. And then next thing you know, you're like, oh, your like skill set is like capped out at like a Naga or something. You know what I mean? And it's like because you're trying to go to some invitational and you fight some guy from a major team and you're trying to like, you know, Imanari roll him the whole match or something. It just never works. And it's like, okay, the top guys, like Gordon's arguably the top athlete in the sport. The thing that separates him from everyone else is the most basic parts of his grappling. You know what I mean? It's not that he has like all these tricks that no one's ever seen. It's just that like when he underhooks you 100% like the most efficient way possible. When he does this move or that move, the most basic parts of grappling, they're done at like the highest possible level. And that's what makes the difference in high level competition. You know what I mean? So like yesterday at the tournament, like with Ryan, it's like we knew like, all right, man, if you end up in overtime, you're probably going to win all your overtimes. You know what I mean? Because of the way that the back mount is being trained, you know what I mean? And the way that a lot of people's like escapes and things like that go, it's just, if you spend energy there, you're going to see success there. You know what I mean? Most people go, yeah, I'm pretty good at getting out of the back mount, dude. I just flatten out or I just do this. You know what I mean? But they've never felt someone like just literally like technically have a strong fundamental back mount that you just don't actually get out of.
Right,
you know what I mean? And like people will go train. That was one of the things I noticed when I first started doing jiu-jitsu is like when I went and trained with guys that were supposed to be like super high level guys, you know, like you would roll with them and they would do something to you that seems so normal and they would just do it and there's nothing you could do about it.
Right.
And it was like either this guy's an alien or he knows something about jiu-jitsu that I don't know. And our lineage goes through Jean-Jacques. And Jean-Jacques is kind of like the OG of that.
Right.
Jean-Jacques like, this is how an underhook works. And he can teach you a 3-hour seminar on an underhook. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is how an overhook works, you know? And that mentality, I think, is what separates it. It's that focus on that one thing. Just making sure that every little piece of everything that we do is as technically precise as it can possibly be.
Dang. And what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Speaking to like your back take, yeah, you were essentially, he was coaching you through it though. I was like listening and watching very intently, but you essentially just kept putting yourself in the best possible position. And I could just see that you were breaking your opponent. Like you kept going, I don't know the exact words you were using, but you just kept making sure he had the underhook that he needed and then stay tight with the face. And it was just like, you could tell that these guys were used to spinning that one time, getting like belly down and then just being able to come up off the back. But you kept telling them just like, no, repummel the underhook, re-get the seatbelt. Can't remember exactly what it was, but I just saw that as you told him what to do and he did it, yeah, I could just see the opponent and just be like, fuck, I was already supposed to be out by now. So now that makes a lot of sense. There's a guy that I train with. He just opened up Artistry BJJ in Houston, Texas. His name's Philippe Rocha. He's turning pro. He won 3 different amateur titles at amateur. Used to train at Alliance. But anyway, he doesn't do anything fancy. And it's funny. It's like I'm going against his purple belts. I'm doing all kinds of shit. And I go against him and I can't do anything. I'm just framing and trying to keep him off me. And he's not doing anything. He's just pressure and fundamentals. And so it really synchronizes with what you're saying. But the first time I heard about you guys, it was on a post on Facebook. And, I've been teaching for a very long time, a lot longer than I've been good at jiu-jitsu. I started teaching martial arts like combatives to Marines while I was in the Marine Corps. And we would just, during lunch, we would just grapple all the time. It's like, the safest way to really spar. So we would grapple all the time. You'd get older Marines that had belts in jiu-jitsu, and they would show us stuff, and we would just, I would just sponge and try taking as much as I could. And I was always interested in the idea of like, how can I learn more about the art of grappling than just like pure jiu-jitsu? And yeah, you had made a post about Kazushi, and you were saying that, it means off balancing, but it means a lot more than that. And you're just kind of going down the line of like, we get caught up in like trying to get, the heel hook or the straight angle. But what comes first is off balancing. And that if you off balance first, it makes everything else easier. And you had this whole post, and I like read it in depth. I think I saved it. I still got it somewhere in my saved files.
Okay, dude.
But yeah, that was kind of like the first thing that kind of like opened me up to like, that there's something outside of the technique itself, right? Usually people's like, oh, we're going to do outside heel hook from outside ashi today. Right. And it's like, so that's outside heel hook from outside ashi. And then I just realized that over time we were just spamming moves, right? It's like, well, now I'm going to do the 411 inside heel hook. And it's like, well, and I would just feel people trying to do it to me, but I've got my stance. And it's like, yeah, I see what you're trying to do, but I have a stance, dude. I'm rooted to the fucking ground. You're not moving me. And then by simple, if you just put your foot on the mat and make me rock forward, put my hands on the mat, now the 411 is there, or the outside heel hook.
Mm-hmm.
So and we were kind of talking about it a little bit, and you were comparing it to like judo and the history of it. But I'd like you to get into that.
Yeah. Like we were talking about before, man, like the thing is like Kazushi, like if you look at the roots of grappling and like all the arts that we have, like jiu-jitsu came first as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned. Jiu-jitsu came, and then judo came from jiu-jitsu, and then jiu-jitsu came from judo. So it's like a really weird progression, right? But the sport of judo is far older than the sport of jiu-jitsu, right? Which is kind of a really weird thing to say, because judo is literally the sport of jiu-jitsu, But anyway, so basically what happens is Brazilian jiu-jitsu comes out, and then Brazilian jiu-jitsu comes to America, and everybody's like, oh, it's this new thing. And it was at the time definitely a very new thing. But in that time, there was a culture of like jiu-jitsu versus the world. Jiu-jitsu needs to show that it's the most dominant martial art. So you saw like the challenge matches, all the stuff. Then you saw like the UFC. The creation of the UFC was literally, let's show everyone that jiu-jitsu is the best martial art, right? The problem though is that all that happened, and that's fine, and it's great. Crazy legacy for jiu-jitsu, really cool time. But the thing is if jiu-jitsu itself is going to progress as a sport, we have to start looking around, because jiu-jitsu is a baby. It's an infant sport. And we need to look around at the other grappling sports and go like, all right, cool. What areas have they refined? Because if you just go on like who's going to beat who in a no time limit match where tapping is the goal. Well, yeah, we tap people. You don't put a wrestler in that match and expect him to tap someone. They don't tap people. You know what I mean? Like it's a weird thing. Like I think we're over that. We don't need to do that anymore. What we need to do is we need to look at those people, and we need to say like, all right, what have you guys refined that we haven't refined yet? And it's not just like, yeah, go to wrestlers and learn takedowns. Yeah, that's like on the surface. That's the easiest thing you can do. It's wrestling is a sport that's been around tremendously longer than jiu-jitsu.
Right.
What do their coaches do? Like, how is their coaching, Judo, like, how do they develop a technique in judo, Like, one interesting thing is Kazushi, right? Like, the 3 pillars of judo. You have off balancing, entry, and execution on your technique. Those 3 little ideas go into your jiu-jitsu moves as well. And judo's refined that forever. Look how long judo's been around. That's how long they've been refining that. Why in the world would we try to reinvent the wheel? You know what I mean? When we can just look at judo and go, okay, judo is an inherently dynamic sport. It requires much more finesse and timing and all these things than jiu-jitsu does, because jiu-jitsu is generally a lot more static. At least jiu-jitsu on the ground, is a lot more static than judo. If they're using this formula to get good at dynamic, kind of chaotic techniques, I wonder what happens if we apply that to a static technique that has far less variables, you know what I mean? And is far easier to sort of replicate, And then we find like, oh, it makes us way better. Who knew? The guys that have been grappling for way longer than us maybe figured something out about how to get good at it, you know what I mean? And it's just this weird stance in jiu-jitsu almost that we just like, it's just us and we're reinventing the wheel over here. Like, nah, you know what I mean? That falls back on what I was saying about Jean-Jacques earlier. Like, Jean-Jacques like, why do you need 15 different variations of the underhook? Why not just actually get good at the underhook itself? You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, like, duh. You know what I mean? Like, that's exactly right. So again, I think like jiu-jitsu, as we bridge into, as we grow as a sport, we need to bridge into these other martial arts, and it needs to be more about a collective grappling than it does about like jiu-jitsu versus the world. You know what I mean? Like if you do a double leg at jiu-jitsu classes, at jiu-jitsu or wrestling, like what are you gonna say? You know what I mean? Like as long as it's separate, as long as it's jiu-jitsu versus the world, you better not be doing single legs. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, we can learn. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny. I was at ADCC Chicago, I think it was, or no, it was the one after that. One of them, and I was sitting in the sauna. It was the trials. It was ADCC trials. So there's like one sauna in the whole city, and so there's a bunch of guys cutting weight, and yeah, two guys I guess live there. They were just asking us about jiu-jitsu and what it is and grappling. And there was this moment where they're like, out of the arts, like which is the best? And it was just like everyone started laughing, like, yeah, jiu-jitsu for sure, right? And then I just made the point. I was like, well, or yeah, he goes, who would win, jiu-jitsu or wrestling? And I said, jiu-jitsu easy, but the best jiu-jitsu guys also train wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's just how it goes. And it's so funny. So like when I've been training wrestling, their stance is way different. And I always wondered that because, I think MMA is kind of like affected jiu-jitsu as well. Like you'll see guys go with a 1 foot forward stance, and it's like very common. And what I've noticed is that if you hang out with a 1 foot forward stance, you're really easy to single leg. And but wrestlers, they never have 1 foot forward. They're almost always like in a square stance, like lower to the ground. And it's because they don't want you touching their knees and their head's lower. And grapplers or jiu-jitsu guys, they tend to be more upright and collar tie a lot and lead with a lead leg. And so yeah, just like I remember someone was showing me how to like teach stance to kids, and it was like, again, when we teach like grab the knee, they get a point, or your hands on the mat, a point. And in order to do that, you're in a more of a square stance where at least the leg that's forward is way more subtle. And then your head's more forward and you're a lot lower. And I was like, but man, I don't see anyone ever grapple like that. And it's like, well, yeah, because no one's really taking low shots. No one's grabbing the knees as much. And since just learning all that, my single leg's gotten way better because almost everyone immediately go, I'll collar tie them. And they're like, oh yeah, well, I'll collar tie you. Boom, I just grab the leg. And so it kind of just entails what you're saying of just like how we can take things from these art and level up our grappling art as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing on top of that too is like, one thing that you're going to notice right away is like all of the little cheat code things like that. You're like, oh yeah, like, especially if you have a good wrestler around you, because you can just ask them questions. We have a guy named George that trains with us. He's from Penn State. And I'll just be like, George, what do you think about this position? And George will just be like, man, honestly, I'll just probably do this. And it's like, sometimes he says something and I'm like, oh yeah, you might get jacked if you try that. But then like, sometimes he'll say something, I'll be like, don't tell anyone about this. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, and the Penn State approach is very similar to the jiu-jitsu approach, of course. So it's like, that's pretty like easy to understand. But another thing that you'll notice right away is that some of the differences are correct. They're there for a reason. Right. So like the example that you just gave, right? Like guys don't stand with like a bent stance. That actually is there's such a deep reason behind that. That actually goes all the way back to the core philosophy of jiu-jitsu. So that's not even like as simple as like, oh, well, you didn't wrestle, so you don't know. It is that sometimes, but it's also that the core philosophy of jiu-jitsu is efficiency and effectiveness over everything, whereas wrestling is just effectiveness over everything. So almost all martial arts, especially grappling martial arts, can be defined by their core principles, right? And you take like Aikido, right? Aikido is just efficiency over everything. So like, we don't really care if this move will never work, but if I could just grab your pinky and make you do a front flip, that would be the most efficient thing of all time. And we can all agree, you know what I mean? And listen, if you could do that, holy, like, I'm going to take out this 350-pound dude with just his pinky, like, that would be the most efficient thing. So they're right in regards to that. They don't care about effectiveness, which is just what practicality is based in. So whatever. Wrestling is pure effectiveness. So you go to most wrestling schools, you shoot a double and the guy manages to get away from you and you're like, coach, what happened to my double? He's just going to go, yeah, you probably should be faster or stronger or whatever. And you're like, oh, cool. He's like, hit the weights or go run, yeah, great. So effectiveness over everything. We don't care if it's efficient. We don't care about any of that. All we care about is it effective? Does it work, right? And then in jiu-jitsu, the reason jiu-jitsu comes out on top most of the time is because we're trying to ride that balance. Right. We want to be efficient. So we're not going to do that big, like, flare double leg for no reason. but we want to be effective too. So we will do the double leg because it works. But we're gonna do this little knee pinch double leg, you know what I mean? Like, and just drive them down, So and then back to the stance thing. Standing in a broken stance, standing in a bent stance requires like quite a bit of energy consumption.
Right.
You're bent over. You have to maintain that. Your quads, like the first thing you notice when you try to do it is like my quads are dying. My quads are on fire, And it's like that goes back to wrestling. Hey man, you need to get better endurance, dog. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
But here's the thing. Wrestlers don't do 20, 30, 40-minute matches. They don't do that.
Right.
They're short matches.
Short.
So most of their technique is designed for that. You know what I mean? That's why effectiveness can be put first in their sport. Wrestling's a sport, right? Like it's not really a martial art in that regard. You know?
Yeah, it's definitely not a martial art.
Right. It's a sport. Like you could make it a martial art if you wanted to, but in reality, 99% of people wrestling are doing the sport.
Yep.
So that's why they do what they do. They have a refined style for their sport. And the reason that jiu-jitsu guys don't stand that way is because if you have a 20-minute match, how in the world do you plan to stand that way for 20 minutes? You don't. You can't. So what ends up happening is we start to notice these differences, like you said, like, oh, most jiu-jitsu guys stand upright. Well, they stand upright because standing like that is taxing, brother. It's taxing. If you stand down, oh my gosh, it's going to be taxing. You're not going to be able to maintain that. And then some of the other differences come from submission problems, right? Like if you drop your head, you get guillotines, big head outside shots. Go ask most college wrestlers what the best double is. They're going to show you a head outside. It's an incredible takedown, but it also gets you in a lot of trouble, you know what I mean, in jiu-jitsu. So I think that like we find like the core principles of our sport sometimes even like will change things between like wrestling, jiu-jitsu, judo, you know what I mean? But with that being said, if you've never dealt with a broken stance before, you can't be the jiu-jitsu guy that just falls back on like, well, I do jiu-jitsu and it's more efficient to stand upright. And just never deal with it because, like you said, you'll just get blasted. Yeah, if you've never seen it. So,
yeah, no, 100%. And so you're saying how like jiu-jitsu as a whole is really good at some things or a lot of different things, but is really bad at some of the things, and that the other grappling arts have mastered those things, and that we should incorporate those. Man, I felt that way about basketball. I used to play a lot of basketball, and that was like my sport before jiu-jitsu. I quit doing it because everyone talked a lot of shit, and we're throwing a fucking biscuit around. Like, it's like, well, none of us is actually fighting. So, and I was in the Marine Corps and I used to fight. So I'd always want to fight people, and they're like, oh, hey, we ain't fighting. I'm like, well, then quit talking shit.
I know.
So at least jiu-jitsu like satisfied that urge where it's like, if we're talking shit, at least one of us is actually better at something. And, but what I noticed that from me going into, from basketball to jiu-jitsu is that I learned a lot about feinting and fakes. It's like a lot of people, how do you get a move if someone knows that move's coming? It's like, well, if I fake one way and then go the other way, I can still get it. Or I can, in basketball, you can literally hit the same fake multiple times in a row and then still get the same thing. So like, you're in the post and you have the basketball on your chest. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, and then hit him. So I've been able to use that in my jiu-jitsu and it works for me. And I also noticed that I'm more inclined to stand on my feet than go on my knees. Whereas like a lot of jiu-jitsu guys, they learn and they want to get down and top half guard on their knees. And for me, I think I can pass on my feet a little better. And obviously a mixture of both is the best. But again, something that's very obvious in basketball can be true in jiu-jitsu. It's just more subtle, right? The fakes, the feinting, the using your feet, the, like cross-stepping and little things like that. And then obviously it applies in wrestling, like the collar ties, the head fakes. Even like the rotillas, they have like crazy feints.
Yeah,
like they're always like bobbing and weaving their head, and it's because wherever their head goes, they got such long arms, they can like reach right across and grab your foot or your fucking knee. And so, it's just funny how like these little things that can get lost, and when you have so much other stuff to focus on in jiu-jitsu, can be profound if you practice other grappling arts or other sports in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think like. There's so much to learn, man. Just in the coaching and just in like, we can't just do this thing where we show up every day and you just show a move and everyone just tries to memorize the move, because that's how you end up with like all these guys in your gym. Like you'll go to some gyms and they'll just be like, yeah, man, everyone here just has a completely different game. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, sure. Everyone likes different stuff. But it's like, no, man, like completely different game. Like if you roll with like 3 black belts in the school that all got their black belt from this guy, they all feel like they trained at different places. You know what I mean? And when that happens, to me, that just says that that's a product of like just showing a bunch of moves. And then this guy latched onto these moves. This guy latched onto these moves. This guy latched onto these moves. And then all the important parts of jiu-jitsu, the parts that actually make a difference when you're going live with somebody, they all develop that stuff on their own around the moves that they latched onto. Whereas like if you're training the connecting points, the points that are the most important, then it kind of feels like everyone's doing the same things, but it's just a different flavor. You know what I mean? And so like for instance, like could be something very simple, like a defensive movement, right? Like outside passing has been trendy in jiu-jitsu right now. Everyone wants to do outside pass. And so the most fundamental basic counter from the guard to an outside guard pass is just snapping the head, right? When they do an outside guard pass, they bring their head and their hips to the same side of your body. They then task themselves by choosing that with bringing their head across your body to pin you, right? Because you can't really pin without that. And so when they choose the side, if you snap them to that side and lower their head height and raise yours, they no longer have the ability to bring their head across. They can no longer do an outside guard pass. It's pretty much over. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter the outside guard pass that they chose. It could be a Torriano pass. It could be this camping pass style that Danaher guys are pushing. It could be a million different outside pass styles. But the moment that they choose to put their head and their hips on the same side of your body, they have an obstacle set in front of them that they put there themselves, and you can just capitalize on that immediately, right? So very simple, very easy to understand fundamental counter. Snap the head. If you come in and train, like let's say you come to our school and train and you try to outside guard pass. If you roll with white belts, you roll with black belts, the moment you do that, they're all going to do the same move. You know what I mean? No one's going to try anything crazy. No one's going to try to like do some wild inverted move or like grab your arm and like do some weird thing. You know what I mean? They're all just going to go, all right, cool. And they're going to grab your head and push your head down. You know? And it's like, what happens after that? Like maybe they come up into a front headlock, maybe they do whatever. What happens after that may be different person to person to person. You know what I mean? Because they all see those opportunities to progress their game a little differently. But the initial movement, the most fundamental movement will always be the same. You know what I mean? And we have a visiting black belt. He's a good friend of mine. He's like one of the BJJ Globetrotters guys, and he travels all over the world. Super nice dude. Comes in and trains, and he rolls with, a handful of guys in the gym. And he was like, bro, every one of your guys, including the white belts, did this move to me. And it was that move. He's like, I'm trying to do this outside guard pass, and I couldn't make this work on anybody today. And I was just like, oh yeah, this is the most fundamental part of stopping an outside guard pass. And so that white belt didn't need to know, this black belt probably knows a million things about that guard pass. The white belt just needed to know that it was an outside guard pass, and now it didn't work. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm whatever happened after that, I'm sure he wrecked that white belt. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But he just took note of that same movement, And I think that comes from, that's the same thing. Like, all right, cool. Like, these are the fundamentals of our sport. These are the basic parts of our sport. We have to identify these. We need to be training these. These are the connecting points of our sport. You see what I'm saying? It's not about developing a crazy reverse De La Riva guard or developing all these other things. It's not about that stuff, man. It's about the initial grip fight. It's about understanding how your opponent is standing. It's about understanding head height. It's the most fundamental basic parts of it. And once you do that, then you can start picking apart the best guys. You know what I mean? So when guys are like, man, if you had to fight this guy tomorrow, what would you do? Here's the game. You know what I mean? Because that dude stands with this leg forward in this stance, and he likes to do this guard pass. So we'll just do this thing. You know what I mean? And 9 times out of 10, it works exactly the way you wanted it to work. You know what I mean? Every once in a while, you deal with some weird, they've just changed everything. You know what I mean? They're a new guy, That's good for them. But it's pretty rare to see that in jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's one of the big things we miss in our sport is this heavy emphasis on the most basic parts of it. You know?
Yeah.
And that stuff is just... That's why you see these guys like Gordon. They're accusing Gordon of throwing matches now. I see how you saw that.
Yeah.
Oh, these guys must be throwing their matches. And it's like, no, dude, that's literally what jiu-jitsu looks like. He's literally just doing the most basic jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Passing the half guard, like you said. Passing the half guard, man. We've been focused on passing the half guard for the ADCC rule set. And the moment we started focusing on passing the half guard, dude, watch this guy. Just go watch Ryan. Just go watch. Just go watch that, dude. It's
No one watches this thing. You get
Ryan fought Kevin Crane in the finals of an ADCC Open. Kevin tried to Kani Basami Ryan, so he basically took the bottom position. Ryan went to half guard, and within 20 seconds, he was done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like,
I'm gonna watch it.
Dude. And it's just like, people are like willing to let you go into top half guard because they're just like, I'm fine. I got a half guard, I play half guard.
Shit.
And then they feel that and they go, what?
Taza won't.
Yeah, Taza was not trying to let that happen.
Taza
Yeah.
won't let that happen, bro.
Yeah. Well, because Taza trains with guys that do that. He trains with Giancarlo. He trains with Gordon. He understands what happens to you when you let somebody get into that top half guard position,
Yeah, no, I've definitely felt that before. Some guys I go bottom, like I do bottom half guard a lot. It's kind of like my safe space. But yeah, some guys it's just like, you learn. It's just like, because you can get caught up in like letting someone get an overhook and like, or an underhook, and I'll just fight from the overhook and get a frame and then fight from there. And then you go against the better guys and you're like, oh, well, I should never let you get chest to chest like that ever,
right?
Because I'm fucked after that.
Yeah, and you just learn that about everyone. You're like, I'm never gonna let anyone get there ever again.
Yeah.
Or like just how to control underhooks, overhook, the whole nine. It's like the most basic parts of the sport. I studied Jean-Jacques butterfly guard for almost a decade and built my entire butterfly guard off of it. You know what I mean? Like Jean-Jacques revolutionized the butterfly guard. It was going to ADCC, Sumigaishi from the butterfly guard every match, taps the guy, it's over. Just one of the first ADCC legends,
Right.
Studied him when I was coming up, played his game, trained with Jean-Jacques like maybe 2 years ago. And we're doing butterfly guard at the seminar. And I asked him like about this little position. I was like, yeah, what about this? And Jean-Jacques was just like, oh, yeah, you just slide your hip over to their hand and they're gone. And I'm like, dude, I've been studying your butterfly guard for 10 years. I've never seen this before. You know what I mean? And it's like the most simple, basic thing that like at any point, if I had ever asked him that question, he'd be like, oh yeah, whatever. But like 10 years later, after studying it and being there myself for that long, I still didn't know that one little like fundamental part of it. You know what I mean? And it's like we were on a conversation with somebody yesterday and they were talking about the escapes in overtime. And they were comparing one of the guys to Ryan, and they were saying that guy was doing the same thing Ryan was doing, but it just wasn't working for him. And I was like, he wasn't doing the same thing. He goes, yeah, he was. He was driving to that side. He was trying to turn. And it's like, I mean, I understand that like that's what you see when you look at it, but trust me when I tell you, they're not doing the same thing. You know what I mean? Because fundamentally, it's like this shoulder came forward, this hip was turned here, this foot was planted. Like these things happened that you don't see. Because on the surface, it's just fall to your left side, do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the part of jiu-jitsu that I think for the most part, people are just not worried about,
Yeah.
You talk to most blue belts in modern jiu-jitsu, they're like,
buggy jokes.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's what they're worried about, right? But what do they, but it's like, if you ask them like, hey man, do you know like how to hold on to head and arm control? They're like, yeah. And you're like, cool. And if you put them with like a solid guy, they have no idea how to hold on to head and arm control. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, if you tell them like, hey man, I want you to escape the mount, you know what I mean? Like, all right, great. And they try to escape the mount and they're trying kipping escapes. They're trying everything. Nothing's working. And they're like, oh, I can't get out. You know what I mean? That's the big thing. So all the way back to your initial question, like what's going on at the gym that's different? That, you know what I mean? Focusing on that, the most basic parts of the sport, you can simplify it. Guys like Marcelo Garcia, these guys have simplified jiu-jitsu so much and people don't appreciate it. It's like even Gordon, but like Marcelo, it's like Marcelo just didn't even believe in like Kimuras, or like arm triangles. Like I don't even do arm triangles, or like Darces. He didn't do any of those moves. Marcelo was like fucking arm bar, a triangle with his legs, rear naked choke guillotine, right? Omoplata, but I don't even think he was trying to tap people with it. He was just sweeping them. And it's like when you simplify your jiu-jitsu, you don't have to do all that. That's a lot what he did. But if you do that, what it said to me was, if Marcelo gets on your back, you die, right? If he gets a guillotine on you, you die. Great. So now all Marcelo ever thinks about in jiu-jitsu is how to answer every position with a path to one of those things. That's all he thinks about ever. He just goes, all right, we don't have to worry about maybe there's an arm bar over there. We don't have to worry about any of that stuff. We just go, when someone tries to underhook me right here, I always pummel this arm to this position because this is where the guillotine happens. And all he ever has to think about is getting you there. He'll never have to think about, does it work? He'll never have to think about, if I get this guy here, will I be able to do this or whatever? He'll only ever think about the connecting points, the most chaotic neutral parts of jiu-jitsu. That's it. And once he can navigate those, how do you stay away from him? How do you do anything to him? You know what I mean? And that's why Marcelo is one of the legends of the sport, because guys couldn't solve the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
They're worried about a million things, and Marcel's only worried about that one thing, you know?
Yeah.
It's just simple, man. So when you're doing those moves, when you're doing the ashi to heel hook thing, it's important to train those things. You have to be good at those things. As a matter of fact, you should master those things. But that's not going to take you to the highest level of the sport.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what people hyperfixate on. Oh, look, this guy did a heel hook in 3 of his matches. We need to train heel hooks. Well, you should if you don't. Watch how he got to his heel hook in all 3 matches. Not just the entry, though. How did he start his match? How did he constantly pull those guys out of their games and put them in position for him to attack? You know what I mean? The 3 pillars of the sport. How did he put them in the perfect position to attack them? How did he enter into that attack? And how did he execute that attack? Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's the 3 pillars. That's balancing, entry, and execution. You know what I mean? Balancing is all about just creating the most favorable opportunity to enter into my position. Entering into my position is about finding the most efficient way and safe way, honestly, to enter into the best possible position. And then execution is about actually performing the movement, right? And if you hyper focus on any one section of that, you'll find gold there if you're watching really good guys. But if you look at them as a whole, it's one big piece of art, you know what I mean? Then you start to see like a story there, you know what I mean? You start to see like, okay, this guy leads with his left leg. This dude sat, but he sat on this hip and he used this hand to pull him. You know what I mean? Then you see like, okay, once his hands were on the mat, great. Now he went into this position specifically based on the angle of the hips. You know what I mean? And then you see like the execution of the technique and you're like, okay, great. So it looks like whenever he finishes this, he moves his hip here, he does this. You know what I mean? And so you could have the same exact outside heel hook and inside heel hook as Eddie Cummings. You could literally master the inside and outside heel hook. But if you have no way of dealing with the neutral position at the beginning of a match, you're probably going to cap out at local tournaments.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's the hyper focus. You know what I mean? That's what makes the difference, at least in my opinion.
No, I completely agree with you, dude. You're blowing my mind. I'm gonna be looking at jiu-jitsu a little differently. So I'm excited. But I know you guys don't have a lot of time. You guys got to catch a plane, and it's a little chilly out here. But I do want to give Ryan, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of talk about like any advice that you might have for any young competitors that, you know, kind of want to be like you. You're an ADCC Open champ. You're a main character jiu-jitsu champion. Man, I'm not going to pick against you again. If I'm seeding trials or anything, I'm not picking against you. So just for, you know, the whites, blues, purples out there that are trying to level up their game, you're essentially, you know, in my eyes, you're one of the masters at cutting weight. You're always one of the bigger guys in the division. And one time I was telling you that I was been struggling with my shoulder, and then you gave me like a whole thing. You're like, do you have a band? I was like, I do. And you're like, do you have it with you right now? And I was like, I do. And you're like, well, pull it out. And then you pull it out. You think, so I tie it to this, and I do it here, I do it here, and I do it here. This many reps, 3 times every workout. And since then, dude, I forced myself to do it after all my workouts. Yeah. You know, I was like, if Ryan Aitken's doing this for his shoulders and he says it helps, then I'm doing it.
I did it. I did that same shoulder routine yesterday before I went out and competed, man. Like, you know, I don't think I'm the only competitor out there that runs into a lot of shoulder issues. So it's important, like it's such a complicated joint. So it's important to find a band routine that you can do commonly, like, you know, before or after training and before competitions and stuff. Same thing with knees, man. If you can bring a heavy duty band, to practice, that's ideal. You know, we just got to look after our joints, man. When we're doing jiu-jitsu, you know, if we're practicing proper braking mechanics, then like if you're the guy having it applied on you, then you need a routine to like, you know, work on your joints and stuff. If you are the guy attacking it, then your teammates are going to get better and better at defending and trying to like stop you from pulling their body apart. So your body's just going to get thrown out of whack too. You know, I mean, when you do this for a long time, you need to consider how do you stay in this sport even longer. And so you need to develop a routine for physical therapy and stuff. You know, it's really sad to watch people like fall off because of just really bad chronic injuries and stuff. You know, I've seen it over the years. And all it takes is, you know, like things like yoga, band work, you know, things to stay in the sport. And just keep at it, you know. It's kind of like investing in stocks, you know. It's about time in the market, not trying to time the market, you know what I mean? Though I'm gonna be honest, you have a little bit more of an advantage because in jiu-jitsu you can like pick a gym to go time, when you're at the gym and shit like that, like which gym is taking off, having a big wave or something like that, but also on top of that, it's about being there the longest, so longevity, man.
Yeah, I think Chris Hodder said it right. It's like, it's not about who's the best, it's about who's left. It's
Yeah,
not about who's good, it's about who's left.
yeah, for sure.
And then what about cutting weight, dude? I know you said you had some thoughts on that.
Oh,
You were the
dude.
biggest guy in the bracket last night.
Yeah, so cutting to 185 has like been it's been rough, man. Like I've gotten bigger as I've gotten older. I used to fight MMA at 170, so I'd cut from 185 to 170. But of course I was way smaller, and over the years, because I picked up weightlifting when I was like 20, 22 or something. And after about 5 years of weightlifting, I noticed that I put on another like 10 pounds and stuff, doing squats and deadlifts. So like to be able to make these lower weight classes and stuff, I have to cut. Otherwise I'm fighting in like 205 and stuff against guys that are cutting down from 220, 230, So when it comes to cutting weight, and cutting water weight, ideally you want to do the night before, or like day before weigh-ins. But even if you got to do the day of, it's important to do like staggered weight cuts. So like you're doing multiple weight cuts. You're not just getting in the sauna for 5 hours trying to cut 15 at once,
Yeah.
So I view the body as like litmus paper. So it's like, when you drink water, it's gonna hydrate your organs and then slowly rise to the top, and so I'm like cycling a little bit of water in while I'm doing like after these little like 5-pound cuts and stuff. And I'll do about like 3 or 4, 5-pound cuts, the day before, 2 days before the weigh-ins. And that's kind of how I get down, man. It's been really successful for me. And those last few pounds, man, a sauna suit goes a long way. Like wearing cotton underneath that, man, like it'll just soak everything up. Like, yeah, that'll go a long way. So if you guys are looking to like cut weight and be able to make the weight division like, lower than you, I got some tips for you.
Yeah, hit him up. And it's funny, you roasted me one of the times. I think it was ADCC Denver. I was like, came up and said hi. I was like, oh, Ryan, I follow you from Comedy Jiu-Jitsu or whatever. And you're like, oh, you're beating. I was like, yeah. You're like, what division? I said 220. And you're like, you're a little small for 220, aren't you? And I'm like looking up at you and you're fucking. I was like, I guess. And I was like,
yeah, because those guys are massive, bro. Like you got what Luke Griffith did that one, right?
Yeah, he wasn't there that time, but no, yeah, it's
Bro.
all mongoloids. It's all mongoloids in that division.
Are you kidding me? I say that because like I don't know, maybe I'm in between the divisions, but like if I was to go up to that, I would need to like run all the fucking steroids and look like Arnold Schwarzenegger to like young Arnold.
Yeah.
to like make, that what is it, 220 pounds?
Yeah,
like,
it's under 220. Yeah.
Oh my God, dude. Those guys can cut from like 240 to that easy. Like that's an easy day for them, bro.
Right.
Oh, that's terrifying. Yeah. I don't know, man. I mean, I think I'd rather just jump to fight the giants at 300, I mean, the only guy with real technique out there, I assume, is Big Dan and some of the ADCC vets. So
No, yeah, I think about it all the time. I'm like, man, 99 is definitely harder than above 99. Like if you look at above 99, there's a bunch of, there's definitely a fat guy can get underneath somewhere in there.
Yeah.
but no, it was just cracking me up. Since then, my diet's gotten a lot better. It's like you train every day, twice a day. You're like, I'm gonna eat a cookie after dinner, and then we're eating a cookie after dinner every day. And then next thing you know, you're like, man, why don't I have abs even though I train 2-3 times a day every day? But now as these ADCCs have gone on, I've just been able to like slowly get better and better. So I'm still in the 220 division, but it's easy for me to get there. I don't have to like die.
Yeah.
Because I was at 230 at one point. So, and I would cut 10 pounds the night before and then show up to weigh-ins miserable and then, not be able to do any like type of media or talk to anybody because I was miserable. But now I'm under 220. So now it's like I can show up, I feel good. And then so I guess, yeah, the goal would be is to get down to like the one below that. I think 93 kilograms, like 205 or something like that. That'd probably be the best bet for me. And I'm still working my
That's
way
where
there.
I'm at. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we should be in the same division. I mean, looking at you, like standing next to you. So yeah, you're a little bit like more like meatier than me, but
Well, not
I
in the
guess
back. Not in the
yeah.
back. I was sitting with Tori at VFP and we could see your back muscles through your rash guard, and I was like, this fucking guy. I was like, imagine, I think she said it, she was like, imagine having to grapple him right now. I was like, oh, hell no, I ain't trying to grapple this motherfucker right now.
I'm all lat, no chest, man. I don't know what it is, bro.
Well, man, I really appreciate y'all coming down and taking the time to do the podcast with me. It was beautiful to watch you guys come in and do y'all's thing. I do want to ask one last question. Is there a specific reason why you say his full name, like Ryan Aitken? Is that like a...
Yeah, because I have so many students now with the same name that I got used to calling Kevin Beering, right? Because we had another Kevin at the time, and they would compete on the same stuff sometimes, or like an open tournament, you know. Right. And I would be like, all right, Kevin Beering, you know what I mean? Like, and so I just got used to it. And we also have my first black belt. His name is Chase Hanna. I had 3 Chases at one point in time.
Oh, dang.
And Chase, they all got nicknames. Well, one of them was Chase. The original guy was Chase. And then there was Chase Hanna. And then there was another guy that got a nickname. So I always called him Chase Hanna. And I think it just turned into a thing where I just do that with all of them now. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, all right, man, like they just get called whatever comes to my mind. You know what I mean? Because I'm just like not focused super hard on that part of it. You know what I mean? Just more focused on like what's going on in the match. So I don't know. I feel like last night I called him Ryan Aitken and I called him Ryan sometimes too. You know what I mean? Maybe it helps with like if I think, because I was struggling last night with thinking that they couldn't hear me. You know, it was kind of quiet in there. Yeah. Because sometimes like they would look back at me. You know what I mean? And there's been matches before where they've like done that and they were like, yeah, I was looking back at you because I couldn't hear you. And so I was like, damn, I wonder if they can hear me.
I'm just looking for answers.
So I was like, okay, well, if I say the full name for whatever reason in my head, I'm louder. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's a good question. I've never really thought about it that much. It just kind of happens, you know?
Oh, gotcha.
You know, have you ever like cornered somebody and you just start saying things and you're just like, I don't really know why I said it that way, but that's why I said it.
Well, I do definitely like try to get their names. It's like, you know, it's very important to like make that connection with them because they're essentially in the fog of war. Yeah. I was coaching last night and it was a guy that's like a part of a sister school that I see him a lot and we have the same game. So I was just trying to get to him and I was just like, Matt. And like, once he made eye contact with me, I was like, you gotta do this. And then he was able to do it. Yeah. And it's like, cause I've had random guys step in to be my coach and I already know, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna hear you, dude. Yeah. You know, it's like, you have to, if you've been in it, you know, it's like, you need to be either screaming at me or maybe they need people like, Scott Pelzo, you know, like
well, I should, you know, the clarity of it and then like the communication between a coach, you know, like you said, oh, this guy doesn't know me. I'm not gonna hear his voice. You know, if we talk a lot, you'll hear that voice, you know what I mean? But if you don't know him. So I think I just have a bunch of little vices like that I use, and them I don't really know why I do. But I think last night I was calling him by his full name because I was worried he couldn't hear me. After it was over, I asked him, I was like, could you hear me out there? Like, could you hear that? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay, all right. It's not that he wasn't doing the things. He was doing all the things. So I was like, I don't know, I guess. Yeah. But it was just like, the like looking back, you know what I mean?
That's the anxious look, man.
Yeah. Dude, I was coaching at Subversive one time and Eddie was in the corner with me and Ryan like looked back and Eddie like grabbed me and goes, he's looking for you for advice, bro. I was like, yeah, man, I know. Like Eddie was just like, dude. But yeah, man, it was this was great, dude. This was a pleasure for me, dude. I was really happy that we could do this.